The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
This is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
it might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't
The
care.
BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the Sports Guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report. It is the All Celtics Panic Edition. It's not even panic anymore. It's just angry resignation. The season is probably done. Next season might be done. Sean Grande, he's babysitting his young child. We had to pull him out of babysitting duty. Lord knows what's going to happen to this child. Sean Grande, what's happening?
Clearly he's upset, and you're upset. And you've
Everyone's
become,
upset.
I've realized who you are. It just occurred to me within the last couple of minutes who you are. You're the guy that only calls when there's disaster. People only hear from you when there's something horribly, horribly wrong. Like, it's never a call to catch up and say, hey, how's everything going? Hey, I saw your game last night. You had a great call that. What's going on with the kid? How's your life going? It's only something horrible has happened to one of the teams I care about. Let's do a podcast. That's
Just
what
to
it is. I mean, that's who we are to you. Like Almost Famous. Who am I to you? Who am I to you? And now we all know who we are. This is the place we have in your life.
To
I'm
be
going to
fair,
cheer you up, by the way, in the next 20, 30 minutes. But go ahead.
to be fair, I did text you a couple weeks ago after I heard you and Max on one of the weird Sirius channels when sometimes you guys pop on, and I was excited. And it reminded me that you can call a professional basketball game with the best of them. We should mention you're the radio play-by-play boys. I can't speak of the Boston Celtics, and you've had that gig for a while, and you have been there for the entire Rajon Rondo era, as well as the entire Doc Rivers era. This kind of came out of nowhere. Like I'm waiting. The Boston fan in me, who always expects the worst and is suspicious of everything, is waiting for the nightclub story that Rondo fell in a nightclub on the ice at 3 a.m. But it doesn't seem like that happened here.
It didn't happen. It was a freak thing that happened, obviously, in Atlanta. Now, with 1,000 websites covering it, the video was online within like an hour. Everybody
It was amazing.
The Atlanta game in the fourth quarter and the overtime for that, that drive to the basket and the sort of the strange fall. It really was so bizarre about it. And we're going to be mentioning the name Derrick Rose several times, I have a feeling, over the next bit of time. But Max and I would always say, whenever we saw Derrick Rose play, Max, I don't want to say jinxed the Rose injury, but we've been saying for years that the way Derrick Rose plays, the way he cuts, the way he moves from left to right like a cat who jumps sideways, that Max always felt, Cedric Maxwell, who I did the games with, that Derrick Rose was like destined for an ACL injury, whereas Rondo wasn't that way. You thought he might, smash his head, taking one of those shots, driving to the basket and always, getting hit hard and going down to the ground. But this is what happened. He just had an awkward landing. And what was so bizarre about maybe the most bizarre regular season day I've been through in 15 years in the NBA is that he went through his regular pregame routine. It was stunning when we found out very late. He was a late scratch for that game. He was playing, everything was normal, and then it was, he's not playing. We found out literally 5 minutes before the game. We had taped most of our pregame show, like we had been through most of the pregame. And that's why this is, the major injury with Derrick Rose. It happened in the game. Everybody saw it, whereas this was just one of these quiet things that, we found out and Twitter went crazy. And by the time you got to the third quarter, everybody in the arena, I'm looking down from our spot, everybody's on their smartphones, everybody's on their devices, and everybody knew clearly in the building except the players.
Yeah, I was amazed that Paul Pierce never found out. They somehow kept it a secret from him. But, as the rumors started flying around, we were doing the NBA show yesterday, and Doris Burke had interviewed Rondo. Before the game, we interview one player from each team, and then we cut clips from that. And she had done it like, I don't know, an hour and a half before the game time or whatever. So we were all like, nah, there's no way. He did the Doris interview. He would have had to have gotten hurt in the shoot around. But then it doesn't even seem like that happened. And what's bizarre is that he thought he had like hurt his hamstring, or I've just never heard of an injury like this. We knew Rondo was a freak and we knew he might be an alien, but here's like real signs that he might be an alien form. Like his alien ACL got hurt and he thought it was his hamstring. I don't understand it. He's just a freak.
I'm sure there's another injury. I'm sure there's another injury that a football player has had where this happened a similar way, but they didn't really realize it until after the fact. I'm sure we'll hear a lot of stories from people who say, "Oh yeah, that happened to me," or "That happened to this guy. It happened to this guy at this college," and it was strange. And by the way, I cited that. We get the video feed, and I saw the Rondo interview with Doris before the game. And that was one of the reasons I said it during the first quarter. I think on air, I said that he had done the pregame interview with that was an indication that he was playing and how strange the story was. So it was a pretty bizarre day that ended with Rondo doing what we all thought he would do at the start of the day, which is steal the headlines from Ray Allen.
Right. And the irony is that the team and all of the limitations of this team in this season and, so, the mistakes from the summer, all signings that I liked. I'm not going to say that I was against any of them, but the way this team was constructed and the failings of that team led to Rondo blowing out his knee because they blew a 27-point lead. This is a team that just has not been able to even put together two consistent halves in a row. And the reality is when you're up by that many points against an Atlanta team that doesn't even have Lou Williams, that game should have been over with 5 minutes to go in the third quarter. I did the update that Friday. They made me do one of those updates, and it was 59-40. And went back in, looked up 2 minutes later, it was 59-55. And then I think it was tied. That had to have been the weirdest game of the season anyway, and then he gets the ACL in there. But as you're watching that game, didn't that game symbolize the season in general?
Oh, without question. And I sort of launched, in the second overtime when the game got away, I launched into my sort of impromptu speech about if you didn't realize that what we call the new Big Three era, or whatever this has been, is over, and that it's something else, which I think is hard for people to accept, even though it was pretty apparent from the start of the year that was the night that I ended up sort of eulogizing it, and because you knew people were really mad. Twitter gives you the indication of what the mood is going to be at the moment and then after the game. So you knew people were really, really going to be mad. And my point that night is, be as mad as you want, but let's think about 6 years ago in 2007, everybody's sitting around their cube playing the draft lottery game on ESPN.com, before there was Grantland to go to first, to play see if you're going to get Odin or Durant. You're welcome. To see if you get Odin or Durant or how that worked and how losing 18 in a row. And you literally went from 1 year being, for most of the season, the worst team in the NBA with a two-guard named Allen Ray, to the next year being the best team. They didn't have Jordan on it in the last 25 years, and Ray Allen was your starting two guard. So you got to appreciate, if you're a Celtics fan, that the whole thing was conjured out of nothing and what it had been. But that was really the night to say, okay, and how bizarre the Rondo thing would happen the next day, because to me, and I'm sure we'll get to it, when that game was over Sunday, it is the best I have felt about this season for the Celtics almost since it started, in one of the most bizarre statements you're ever going to hear, because everything has now obviously changed for this season, and maybe for the future. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because I think it was devastating. It really hurts the league to not be able to watch Rondo. As Celtic fans are not watching the second half of the year, that's really going to be a bummer. But I think the people that are most devastated about this year's Celtics were the ones who hadn't yet accepted that this wasn't going to be a turn it on and go to the finals team. Were they going to be better in the second half? Probably. But this notion that last year was going to happen again, I think a lot of people hadn't really sunk in. Because, Bill, as the ultimate NBA historian, when I say the following number, you will understand how bizarre and rare and significant it is. For 3 calendar years now, the Celtics have had a better record in the playoffs than they have had in the regular season. That just doesn't happen. And It was likely not going to happen again. It takes a lot of bizarre circumstances. But the idea of blowing it up and starting over, for people who don't know, the Celtics have 9 new players on their roster. This is as close to blowing it up as you get in the NBA. This was the year everything changed. It had already changed. But it took yesterday, I think, for people to sort of accept that we're on, as Celtics fans, you're on to what's next already.
And then I look at last year's playoffs. Maybe there's a little bit of a fool's gold to that, because
a lot of fool's gold.
The reality was, it should have been Chicago, Miami.
Yep.
Celtics sneak in, barely get by Philly. And then, Miami really almost self-implodes in that series. Celtics get hot. Game 4 was a really strange game that Miami kind of left on the table.
That's the game they got in 2011 that they didn't get last year. It easily could have been 3-1. Everyone talked about the bad calls against the Celtics in Game 2. There were bad calls against Miami in Game 4.
Game 5, Celtics played great. All the swagger from the KG are on display. LeBron kind of melts down just a tiny bit. 3-2. I mean, you left those playoffs thinking, wow, that's amazing. The spirit of this team, all that stuff, and all that was true. But the reality is, I think they would have lost to Chicago or Miami in round 2. And maybe there was a little fool's gold with some of the signings they did. But at the same time, I don't think they could have anticipated that Jason Terry was going to be this bad. I don't think they could have anticipated that Bass, for whatever reason, just isn't the same guy. And maybe it's just because he got paid or they're yanking his minutes around or whatever. You definitely could have anticipated that KG and Pierce were a year older. And I think the big mistake that they made, and this is what brings us back to the Rondo thing, they were hoping that Rondo was going to take his game to another level. And this is something that on TV Magic has been saying, and we've been arguing about it. And Magic's like, it's time for Rondo. He's got to, make up those extra 6 points a game. He is who he is. He's 13 points, 11 assists, and 5 rebounds a game. And that's who he is. He's going to have the occasional Knicks game like he did Thursday night where he goes nuts and takes over and he's super aggressive national TV Rondo. But ultimately that guy's not there from game to game. And that was the big flaw with this team, which brings us to the big question. Are we sure this team is going to be terrible now that Rondo is not on the lineup?
Maybe this will disappoint you when I say it. The answer is no. This team is not going to be terrible without Rondo. And let's take this moment and this time and be very un-team announcer-like. Let's have some tough Rondo love or some reality about what Rondo has been. Rondo, when he plays like he did against the Knicks on Thursday night, which he often does when the country watching, and I don't want to say the author of it, but I'm probably the first one that it occurred to, so I started tracking this particular stat. Thursday night was Rondo's 27th triple-double in the NBA. It's the 20th time he did it on national television. 20 out of 27, okay?
Right.
70-something% of his triple-doubles, not to mention his high-scoring games, 30-point games, an outrageous percentage of those have come in national television games, about 65 to 75% of those type of games, in an era when about 30% of Celtic games have been on national TV. I think you made reference to it, the basic cable Rondo versus the national TV Rondo. And you watch him some nights and you say, there are times he is one of the 5 best players in the world. He is that dominant and completely controls the game. But Chris Paul, who, when Rondo at his very best and Chris Paul at his very best, if you had one game at one of those guys at maximum level, you might go Rondo to win it. But Chris Paul, if he's healthy, is going to give you 65 or 70 of those. And Rondo hasn't gotten to the point yet where he does that. And the problem is, if that is your main guy, and he is now, and this is the point, Rondo's got the keys now. This is Rondo's team. It's Rondo's locker room. He's the guy. And if his performance continues like that, and you beat the Heat, I was saying for weeks, you watch, he's going to have a triple-double against Miami in that game, and the Celtics will win. And then you go to Toronto on a Tuesday night, and Rondo doesn't play well. And you need him to play well to win. And that's what's happened over these last couple of years, is that fair or unfair for a guy who was the 21st pick in the draft. And maybe I just hold him to a higher standard from the beginning because I really thought he could be.
No, hold on. I'm going to interrupt you. You should hold him to a higher standard because, as you said, when he's on his game, he's on a short list of guys who could win 2 games by himself in a playoff series. And that's what he did last year against Miami. They didn't end up winning game 2, but they should have, and they got robbed. But he's a guy that can dominate. It doesn't matter who the team is. He could be the best guy on the floor in 2 of the 7 games. And control, that's what they're missing now that he's gone.
Exactly. And which means, here's the statement I was making all day yesterday. It's outrageous, and then I will explain it. I don't think the end result of the Celtics season in 2013 changed yesterday. I think the Celtics were going to play better in the second half. Now, and there were trades, there was a lot of possible things that with Rondo out of the mix that maybe Danny Ainge can't do with the trade deadline. But I didn't see in this new group, as constituted, the reason you could make a crazy run is because of Rondo going absolutely berserk the entire playoffs. So obviously that's off the table. But what was the percentage, the likelihood of that happening? I don't think it was going to be that good. And if,
especially as an 8 seed.
Exactly. And if you're a 7 seed or an 8, I think that, I think Atlanta might have been catchable, Milwaukee might have been catchable, Philly could get hot. By the way, Philadelphia, the exact same thing happened to them. Now, granted, they had all the issues with Bynum, but their expectations were too high because of the Derrick Rose injury as well. Hey, they got the Game 7. They almost got to the conference finals. This is going to be a leap forward year. But they go, no, it was a fluke that they got to the second round and got as far as they did. An indication of where Philadelphia and Boston were, that they took each other and they put us all through that 7-game series that we had to watch because it wasn't exactly an all-time class.
So the irony is the ceiling has changed for the Celtics team now. As now they don't have a puncher's chance against a good team in a series, and that's the part that you can't forget.
We don't. 3 months from now is 3 months from now, and who knows what this team will look like. What I believe happened is that the 2013 Celtics team, in 3 hours yesterday, the narrative completely changed to a team that the view, true or not, people were looking at them as underachieving. That made them disappointing to people. The 27-point loss to Atlanta, home court losses to teams that are sub 500, and it was disappointing to people. Now, in 3 hours, it has shifted to an underdog team. A lot of people don't think they're going to make the playoffs now, that it could go crazy south, that they could be a lottery team. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't. I think that, there's a little bit of Ewing theory, which I've dropped over the last 24 hours a little bit. And I think there's too much talent, and there's that sense when you lose one of your senses, the others get stronger. And I think there's a lot of pride in that locker room. And I think it's really interesting. I tweeted out the other night, the last time the Knicks won in Boston was November of 2006, when one of us wrote a heavily viewed article about firing Doc Rivers. Okay? And it was about
I stand by it.
It was, but the point is, of course, that sentiment, they were chanting it that night. The reason I brought it up, the reason I linked that article is because that night that the Knicks won in Boston was the night the fans were chanting, fire Doc, which is amazing. And the point being, things change, and if you stick with your stubborn view of things, you don't recognize the changes as they're happening. But my view of Doc Rivers is the perception of him being a sort of, player's coach, whatever. I've always thought that was overrated. And I think the X's and O's and him being a mad scientist and him being just a crazy basketball geek when it comes to, listen, he gets excited about out-of-time outplays. And I think he is going into the lab here and now has a completely different team to coach for the second half of the year. I think there's a lot of pride in the locker room and a lot of people that are going to rise to a challenge. And are they going to win? Are they going to go 30-10 in the second half, like all those numbers that people think the Lakers have to do, which they don't, by the way, make the playoffs in the West? That's a fallacy. But are they going to go 30-10? No, probably not. Not based on everything we know, because there's a lot of really good teams in the East. But I think that not only did the Celtics make the playoffs, I think they become a better story. I can't say a more enjoyable team to watch because when you lose the Rondo factor, and you're going to miss those games, those national TV games. Celtics go into Oklahoma, in March, I think, for an ABC game, and you lose the idea of watching Rondo go crazy in those games. But I think suddenly you have something of an underdog story, sentimentality about watching Pierce and Garnett, assuming there's no trade, and I think it becomes just a different story, and maybe acceptance and appreciation of what's happened in Boston for the last 5 years before it.
They made us do a Sports Center segment like about a half hour after the injury, and I said that, it's a lottery team now. And then I went back in and started thinking about it. And you go through the 7 stages when you lose. Exactly the same thing happened with Brady in 2008. You go through, so then by the end of it, probably by the midway through the fourth quarter, I was in the mode of, we had the 25th offense with this guy.
Yep.
And not only that, not somebody who could do anything in the last minute of a game. And if you watch this whole Celtics season, and probably you and I and 5 other people, the only ones who have, this was a team that blew all kinds of different games in the last minute, mainly because Paul Pierce has slipped in that area. In the old days, we would just get bad shots. Now we don't even get shots. There's a lot of dribbling out of bounds and stupid plays and people getting tied up for jump balls. But they could replace 80% of his stats. He averaged 13 points, 11 assists, and 5 rebounds. You could, with the backup guards that they have, you could actually cobble together those stats. you're not going to get the same shots for Pierce and Garnett. You're not going to get those ceiling games when he just is on national TV and he kicks somebody's butt. But I got to be honest, like if they lose KG, this is a 25-win team. They have nobody to replace him.
That's exactly the point. And the final minute stuff is a great point because Rondo is not a good free throw shooter. Obviously, he might be the best passer in the league, but he struggles sometimes on those side out of bounds plays. That when you have to make the right decision, it's a very bizarre thing about him because he's so gifted in so many ways. But the side out of bounds plays are not his strength, and he has to be the one doing that because they would foul him if he was on the floor and shoot free throws. So that goes away. Does he get other people great shots? Well, I'm not going to say one way or the other. I'll say this. You have some of the greatest three-point shooters in the history of the NBA on this team, and the Celtics for over a month now are shooting under 30% from behind the three-point line. Can't blame that completely on Rondo, but again, as you say, how is the offense running? So I think there's another thing too. Maybe watching 40 games, and this is the ultimate positive spin. And it's funny because I'm normally pretty gruff, negative, cynical guy. Very proud that I've always been that way and to turn that way when I got old. That's why I think why I did it when I was young, so I wouldn't have to say, boy, he's really become cynical. I have the other spin on this is maybe when Rondo comes back, and he is going to come back, and I bet he comes back faster than, I don't think it's going to be a full year. He's probably ready for training camp next year because that's the kind of kid he is. He's just a ridiculous, crazy competitor, even by the standards of professional athletes. Maybe this experience for him and watching what this team does without him, that would bother, when the team would win a game, he would always come back strong without him, meaning he'd come back for the next game. He would play very, very well. And he's, he knows he wants to be that guy. He wants to be that best guy. He wants people to talk about him the way that we all talk about Chris Paul and sort of accept those guys. And it took him a long time to get on that list to where Magic would talk about him the way that he does. It took a long time for him to get there because no one has ever looked at him through high school at Kentucky. No one ever thought of him as one of those guys. And maybe coming back after an injury like that and, maybe seeing the whole field a little bit because he's got a brilliant basketball mind, maybe it makes him better. I don't know. That's a crazy wild spin on what happened yesterday. That's
not a wild spin.
No, it's one of these. I think that this was a season that was so uncomfortable, the 2013 Celtics team, because it was a very transitional year under the guise of, it's the sixth year of the new Big Three era, and, it's the worst, put me in the spot of saying, it's the worst loss in the new Big Three era. It's the biggest comeback loss, and it's this. The Celtics before Christmas were 112 and 20 the first 5 years, and this year they're 12 and 13. And, you can rip the curtain down on that and maybe just appreciate, as you said, as your dad, the season ticket holder, would say, people liked watching that 07 team because they played hard every night. And they had great chances to win. There were games in those 18-game losing streaks that they lost at the buzzer, and they killed them. Look at I don't want to go all John Hollinger on this because I don't want the job that he has now. But, look at the scoring differential of that 07 team that was supposedly this horrendous, hideous team, one of the worst in the league. I think they were outscored by about 4.3, 4.4 points a game. That's not good, but it's not, colossally bad. It means you're competitive.
And that was with tanking in the last 6 weeks.
Exactly. Well, tanking thy name is Gerald Green. Doc Rivers had two secret weapons that year. He had Gerald Green and he had Sebastian Telfair. So
I still love Gerald Green for everything he did that year. Although it didn't pay off. It paid off with the 5th pick.
It paid off, it paid off huge. And, history, obviously, led the Celtics. They missed the lottery. What if they get the first pick? And Odin, Durant, every team has those stories of this one thing that could have gone that way. But Gerald Green, there's an amazing stat, which I don't have in front of me, but the Celtics, when Gerald Green played a certain number of minutes, he was the anti-Avery Bradley. There's an Avery Bradley stat now over the last couple of years. When he plays 10 minutes or more, Celtics are basically have won 2 out of every 3. And when he plays fewer than those minutes, they're 10, 12, 13 games under 500.
Well, Gerald wait a second. We bypassed the elephant in the room. Well, actually, there's 2 elephants. One elephant was that
you've always got elephants. You have elephants in every room, in every
there's a couple
elephants. You're always waiting. What's your elephant?
I have them hanging out in the same room together. One was that yesterday's game was really only the 3rd enjoyable Celtic game of the entire season, which seems relevant since we're at the 43 game mark, right? But
that's the point I was making. This team was not. People weren't enjoying watching what they were seeing.
Oklahoma City at home.
Yep.
What was the second game?
I would say, I mean,
at the Knicks.
I put at the Knicks. The weekend, the Celtics kind of just jumped back in with a weekend. They beat Indiana easily at home. They came from 18 down to win in Atlanta, and then they played the cereal bowl in in
the
New
whole
York.
season, though, I only felt like the Celtics kind of looked like the KG era Celtics
At Brooklyn, Christmas
three
Day.
or four times, right? And last night without Rondo was one of those times.
Exactly.
The level of pride that was on display, and it just kind of felt like the team again, which, and this is one of those things you always hear. It's something nobody was writing, but it was always, anytime Rondo missed a game, there was always a feeling the Celtics were going to play well, and nobody kind of knew why. And it was, maybe there was some competitiveness between Pierce and KG and Rondo, like, this isn't your team yet, buddy, watch this. But I always felt like the Celtics were going to win when he didn't play, which is a weird thing to say.
Well, you know what? That elephant, I mean, we couldn't get that elephant in the building. That elephant was in the building yesterday. It's Ray Allen. That's the elephant. Read the art. Read the stories after, and there were great stories written about Ray Allen leaving. I think, Adrian Wojnarowski wrote probably the definitive one. And it's pretty, listen, this is not brain surgery. The Rondo Ray Allen thing existed. That was an issue. There's a reason Ray Allen was, there are a lot of reasons he was wearing black yesterday and not green.
Yes.
And that certainly was one of them. All that exists. And what I'm saying is, I have watched every game. I've called every game that Rondo has ever done. I think he's a fascinating guy. He's, when I say he's smart, I'm not saying athlete smart. I'm saying really smart. Like regular person smart, often the smartest guy in the room. Ultra competitive. And if you can figure out a way to channel it, it's not that easy. There's a reason he was picked 21st. There's a reason that he has been held out of that group of elite point guards for a while. And it's a lot of, it's off the court stuff, it's personality. And this is kind of what I'm getting at, that maybe having to sit out while he drives himself back maybe that other stuff will sort of click a little bit. Because we always sit here, our lives are obsessed with analyzing all of these, not just the X's and O's, but all these personality issues of guys who, when we were their age, we were doing stupid stuff too. And we weren't nearly as self-aware. And if we're sitting here and doing podcasts about what you and I were like and the decisions we were making and the way we were treating people when we were 23, first of all, not a lot of people would be listening, admittedly. But number two, there might be a little self-awareness in the fact that we have to step back sometimes and realize these aren't video games we're playing. Not, this is fantasy football. These are real people and human beings, and personalities change. And by the way, there's maybe no better example of that than Paul Pierce. He changed as a professional during Doc Rivers' first year. They kind of went, the long-term coach, Doc Rivers, got his first contract here, and he stood his ground against Paul Pierce, whose game had gone, completely, off the rails. The way his approach to the game, and a lot of us thought, I was certainly one, that we were waiting for Carmelo Anthony to do the same thing. I think at some level he has. I think all the nonsense in the last couple of weeks has set that view back. But look at Carmelo is kind of what we talk about with Rondo. That's the way an MVP acts. Is that the way a team leader acts? Is that the way your captain acts? Is that the guy you want to run through a wall for? Is that the guy who's going to hold it together when you lose a big lead on the road and you need that strength? Is that your guy?
Well, and also how you're treating people off the court, how you're treating your teammates, just everything you're doing. You mentioned Pierce, that it was the 05-06 season when he kind of put it all together behind the scenes and changed the way he carried himself. He played hard every night. I don't even think they made the playoffs that year, but I thought he was a possible MVP candidate. He was incredible that season.
He was. That was the year he had the 50-point game.
It was a terrible team.
Time. Yeah, Celtic had a 40-point game until he did it at the end of last year. It was a professional season. It was a turn the corner for him, and it got him ready for what was going to come. Little did any of us know, 2 years later, what was going to happen. That's the
disappointment, though. But that was the disappointment with Rondo, was that I thought that was going to be this season for him. I bought into all the stuff I read about him over the summer, and he's the leader now, and he got the guys together. I'm like, maybe this will be, we've seen this happen with other guys. Maybe this will be for him. And then you watch him no-show some game in Detroit, and I went to the Clipper game. He wasn't in it.
Yeah.
He
Well-
just wasn't there. The game was over at halftime, and it would have been partly because that was a game where he needed to show up, and he didn't.
You know what happened? You won't read about it when it happens. You won't read voluminous articles that were, I don't want to say they were staged, but you won't read all these articles about the maturity of Rondo when it actually, when the real moment happens, it happens. It doesn't happen because you organize
A media
a
campaign.
summer game in LA. That's
Yeah.
not how it happens. You won't read about it. You won't know about it. It'll just, it will happen. And I think there's a great chance that it's going to happen. I've seen all the things you're saying. I've sort of, I live in the world in which they happen. I've seen them all happen. I've watched Paul Pierce make that change, and I think it should be done.
It's the biggest reason why I don't think they were going to trade him this year, even though
Yeah, I agree with you.
you could argue that, well, first of all, doing a 2-for-1 with him wouldn't have made sense. But if you're talking about maybe getting somebody else's blue chipper and a change of scenery trade, he would have been a candidate. But I think because the current ownership and because Danny and even Doc, they were there when Pierce had that transformation, I just think they were giving Rondo an incredible amount of rope and really just hoping, all right, let's be patient. One of these times he's going to get it. I guess the thing for me, you always knew within the first 3 minutes which Rondo you were getting. I mean, wouldn't you agree? You've watched every game he's played. Didn't you know in the first 3 minutes which Rondo was going to be in that game?
Almost exclusively. There's no question.
So that's not a good sign. If you're like, I watched Durant and LeBron in person 5 days apart last week, right? And those guys play in fifth gear. That's who they are. Durant had a bad game yesterday. Oklahoma City lost to the Lakers. He was playing in fifth gear. He just didn't make shots. He didn't no-show the game. Like, he doesn't no-show games. LeBron doesn't no-show games. And that's the level that Rondo needs to get to. And maybe now that he's got a lot of time to think about stuff, maybe he can get to that level. Because I still think he's a brilliant basketball player. And I didn't want them to trade him.
It really, like I said, one of the biggest, the real buzzkill is that it hurts the league not being able to put on League Pass or watch those national TV games and see him perform. I think, and like LeBron, it's really fascinating. Again, if we can go back to our wrestling terminology, the babyface turn for LeBron over the last year, which, if you remember, I've done on this show before. I told you for years it was coming, and it's really something to watch him every night. Even the fans in Boston, they can't even boo him. They can't even do it sincerely anymore because they just appreciate the talent. I was thinking about LeBron that I'm wondering now. The question to me with LeBron is how many titles does he have to win before people accept before we're talking about all time best? When does he? It's a strange thing about because Kobe's got the title, but does he have the rest of it? LeBron is going to have a statistical and physical dominant package that no player is ever going to have when how many more years can he do this at this level? The number,
he needs to move into that last group.
Right.
He's already he's in the top 15.
Right. Oh, yeah, right. Right now. And he's got at 28, whatever he is.
Well, the best part about him in Boston is just after that game 6 last year, he's got the respect now. I mean, it's just there's always going to be respect now. Nobody's going to. Boston fans know if somebody's great, they're going to back off.
And here's the beauty of yesterday. I'm sorry to jump you. I don't want to lose the game yesterday and the significance of it because LeBron. It was about Ray Allen, and the story was really interesting because I was a little bit wrong. My partner, Cedric Maxwell, was very wrong about the reception. He thought nobody was going to boo. I thought it was going to soften a little bit with all the time that's gone by, and it did. It was surprising. It surprised me how harsh it was towards Ray. But it probably shouldn't have because, that's how breakups are. But the last time LeBron was on that floor was the game that changed his legacy, changed the NBA season, and obviously, eliminated the Celtics. But it was also remembered in Boston for the final 2 minutes when the fans who had loved the era and loved that team so much just spontaneously, without any scoreboard encouragement or piped-in noise, started chanting, "Let's go Celtics." And it was loud, and it was visceral. And it was just one of those moments that a city has with its team. And what I said yesterday in real time as it was going on was 2013 team hadn't earned any of that love and passion that the fans in Boston, or in any city really, want to give to a team. And yesterday that all changed. Yesterday, for the first time, they played like that team.
And they have an identity.
Right. And exactly right. And it's fascinating that it happened in the game that LeBron was back on that floor for the first time since. I mean, you think about LeBron's connection with Boston and what has to go through his mind when he walks through that tunnel. You know, the Game 7 in '08, the 2010 night that we did. I'm sure we did this podcast the day before, in between the Game 5 we had in Cleveland and the Game 6, when the whole world, Sports Center, had 4 different reporters. I think they've all left for different places now. ESPN has said the worst year with women than Mitt Romney. It's unbelievable. They've all just.
I know we've lost some good ones.
There's no question about that. I mean, it's unbelievable the depth on that.
Including
side.
your favorite, Rachel Nichols.
Rachel Nichols just left. They lost Dana Jacobson. They lost Beadle.
Yeah.
They lost. It's crazy. But you know what? That's probably another. That's another rebuilding process. They're in as far as women on Sports Center. The lottery is a rebuilding year.
It's a rebuilding year for ESPN.
Yeah, LeBron. In 2010, the Sports Center. The reason I mentioned that, they opened with 4 different reporters covering the LeBron story. They did a 4-box, TV term kids, for when you come on and you have 4 different reporters in Boston in different. I think maybe somebody got the short straw and didn't get to be at the game. They had to be in Cleveland that night. And then there were 3 other reporters at the Garden, all covering angles of the LeBron story, because obviously there was no Tim Tebow thing yet to do. So, but that was the moment. So think about the moments LeBron has had, and then for him to come to Boston last year, in 2012, and have the game that turned. It was either LeBron who did it or the good job, good effort kid, because that was obviously after Game 5. But that it's amazing when a building and a player, especially from another team, they sort of cross paths in history like that.
So, and then you could go full circle and say the KG era started the day they traded the 5th pick for Ray, and Ray was in the building for the end of the KG era. And it might have been the end. I don't know. I mean,
it's a tough one. Like, how do you sort of, how do you mark? It doesn't really happen in one moment. I think as I said, it happened. The artificial thing happened with the Derrick Rose injury, and that was
and they lost the title. That was a whole different animal. Like, they had a legitimate chance to win the title, and this Celtics team, I don't think, had a chance unless they pulled off some incredible trade that we didn't know what it was.
Exactly, and that's again, the Rondo creates feeling, but Rondo also created. I think Rondo created the illusion that
puncher's chance,
2010 or 2012 all over again, or the crazy punch, a long shot puncher's chance in a 7-game series is. You need Rondo to do what he did against Miami last year. Have one.
Well, the problem is 2010 and even last year set the tone for people thinking this team could turn it on. And the difference was, I actually thought this team was playing hard. I mean, I know Rondo would drift between gears, but I didn't like the 2010 team mailed in games and had guys that just weren't interested in the proceedings, like Rashid.
Yeah.
This team tried. Like, Jeff Green tries. Sometimes he just falls apart for whatever reason emotionally. I don't know why.
Jeff Green, I think the thing about Jeff Green is he's been standing around watching Durant and Westbrook. He's been watching that show. And you become a guy, well, I've got all this talent, but if I stay out here at the 3-point line, I'm going to watch this show, and if it's every 8th possession and Russell feels like getting me involved, once he makes sure that he's got a similar number of shots that KD's got. Because Westbrook's another guy who's so outrageously gifted. He's got the game within the game going. He's like Rondo that way. He's sort of controlling the game, and there's all these other things playing in his head. But I think Jeff Green is in Boston. He's got to be. This is going to be about Rondo and Jeff Green. If there's no major deal, that's your axis going forward to build around. And you see moments. Listen, you'd rather have a guy. Jeff Green frustrates people in Boston sometimes, but wouldn't you rather have the guy, if you're starting over again, who's got the extraordinary upside talent? Then it's funny because he and Perk. And here's a stat. First, I don't think people maybe around the league don't even realize it. And certainly in Boston, the acceptance of what you've actually been watching the last couple of years. The Celtics are 75-62 since the Kendrick Perkins trade. 75-62. That's about a 44-45 win team. And this is 2 full years now of that, if you think this is a championship dangerous team. But Jeff Green and Kendrick Perkins, as being the 2 primary guys in the deal, that's the perfect example. Jeff Green, the talent of those 2 guys, talent and upside, it's not even close. Jeff Green looks like he's going to be James Worthy some night. But Perk was a Boston player. Hard on his sleeve. Great in the locker room.
Good low post defender.
Hard every night. And part of that magic 5-man group. Right. That never lost when they were healthy and playing together. So he had his that lovable part of him in Boston sports history. That's not, Boston doesn't necessarily love the best player, but the players that best represented the town. And Jeff Green had to replace that, which was so unfair to him. And that's not, at the stage of his career, he's not that guy.
The problem with Jeff Green, though, Jeff Green is one of those guys, one play sends him either way. Gets a good dunk in the second quarter, he's off. He's going to have a good game. If he does the thing where he gets stripped at midcourt or throws the inbounds pass to Jason Kidd, he's done. He's check him out. Might as well not even play him. He just emotionally shuts down.
You want mental toughness, and look at what he did this weekend. He guarded Carmelo.
He was great.
Anthony
he got a dunk.
Thursday. But look how it translated. He guarded Carmelo, guarded him very well Thursday, and he had LeBron the entire second half and into the overtime on Sunday. And there was a moment. This is the best Jeff Green news that any Celtics fan could hear. Thursday night, he had a long run against Carmelo, and Doc was going to pull him off and switch it up. And Jeff Green said no. And it was like one of the first times Jeff Green stood up, said something like that, and it really took Doc. He was surprised by it, and he was
good on LeBron. LeBron yesterday, I thought he really made him work on some of those shots. Last question, then we got to go to Zach Lowe. Is it up to KG and Paul if there's a trade, or is it up to, or will they not care?
I think they'll care. I don't. It's not up to them. It's up to Danny. And
that's what I meant. Do the Celtics feel like they want to give them the decision on whether they get traded or not?
I think that I'm going to lean towards no on that. I think there'll be I think there's a factor in it, as we've discussed many times. Danny is the last one who's going to fall back on sentimentality. But on the other hand, that doesn't mean he's just going to trade Paul Pierce for the heck of it. It was going to have to be something special. And I think, ownership plays in here. And I think the next couple of weeks is going to determine a lot. And if any of that, not necessarily, 8 wins in a row, but if what you saw on Sunday, that feel carries over here, and there isn't this major deal to make, everyone says, blow it up, make a major deal, and they don't magically happen. It's really hard. Listen, would the Celtics love to get a guy like Kyle Lowry in here? Absolutely. Would you got to upgrade that point guard spot, because you got 5 2 guards now. Basically, you don't really have a true point guard, so it'd be nice to add one to the roster, but I don't, DeMarcus Cousins, Rudy Gay, if there's an opportunity for that, will it be explored? But my gut feeling I'd say the heat of the moment, if it wasn't 20 below wind chill in Boston, I would say that this is going to be what you're going to have here for the most part the rest of the year.
Wow, getting Kyle Lowry would certainly make Rondo seem more congenial by comparison. That would be interesting. People would miss Rondo's personality in about three minutes.
Maybe that's not a bad thing either.
Well, I don't know what's going to happen, but I will say this. I think they're going to play better for the next 2 weeks, and then it will depend on whether they can keep KG and Pierce on the floor, because even yesterday, I think one guy played 49, the other guy played 45.
It's ridiculous.
Can't put those kind of miles on either of them. And Pierce was really starting to wear down these last 2 weeks. The reality is, it was still his team. Everyone was like, it's Rondo's team, it's Rondo's team. This team still hinged on how Paul Pierce did from game to game. And when he played well, they usually won or came close.
It hinged on Pierce offensively. It hinged on Garnett defensively. And here's what you're talking about, keep him on the floor. By the way, the Celtics have the record they have. Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce have been completely healthy. Played every game.
Yes.
And what were so that obviously you can't expect that to happen to continue to happen either. So, all those factors.
When people thought I was panicking that they might miss the playoffs pre-Rondo injury, it was because if KG, tweaked a hamstring for 3 weeks, this team was going to go 2-8 in those 3 weeks. And that's the difference between the 8 seed and 35 wins, which I don't think people realize how important both of those guys were, especially Pierce, who isn't even that efficient anymore in the last 5 minutes. But when you don't have anybody else, you just, what are you going to do? He's got to do the old man pickup moves.
Hey, re-entry is the most difficult part of the mission. And it's hard. This is the reason people hate Boston, by the way, because when you go from being a championship dominant team to, they lost the AFC championship game. They didn't make they lost the wild card. You get so ridiculously spoiled for so long because of what happened here. It's hard to appreciate that sometimes you can be a 46-win team, make the playoffs, have a great 7-game series, and narrowly lose.
Right.
And that can be a very successful, it depends on the narrative and the way you're looking at it. If you can't appreciate that, if you can only appreciate teams that win 65 games and win the championship, what are we doing here every night? there's a great story to be told with the Celtics this year. Like a lot of teams in the NBA that aren't going to win the championship. It's just for the Celtics, it began yesterday.
Yeah, and the last thing I'd say is Rondo going down is a loss more for basketball than the Celtics, I feel like. Celtics were going to win the title anyway, but the Celtics are on national TV a few more times this year, and Rondo is a must-watch. I don't care how you felt about him, whether you want to pick him apart, say this, that. I certainly have spent the last 7 years wishing he did certain things and wondering why he didn't do this or that, but you never knew when the guy was going to throw up a 29, 18, 12. You know, every game that was in play. And I think that's the thing I'm going to miss, just like turning on the TV and not knowing, I wonder if this is going to be one of those Rondo games. And that's any fan can identify with that, not just Boston fans.
And that's the difference between Twitter and a 45-minute podcast. Sometimes you got to pot it out. Sometimes that doesn't let it all out of your system at 140 characters.
Well, were you upset that Rondo, the whole thing took attention away from The Godfather last night, making his Royal Rumble return? Because I thought that was the real tragedy.
It was a difficult day to manage everything because it became a crazy media night, so I couldn't really enjoy the Rumble. I try to get out that once in a while that stat. You know, we had like the longest title reign in 25 years ended last night in WWE.
Yeah.
And the Rumble, which is just if you're into the backstories and the storyline and how everything gets cobbled together, the Rumble is an extraordinary place. Sort of like opening, like Daytona 500, the opening day.
The Rumble's the best.
I
got it. I pay-per-viewed it. Yeah. Hey, I will say though, you'll love this, and then we have to go. 434 days. That was like a fart for Bob Backlund. Come on.
Well, I mean, obviously it's for me personally, it's been a crazy week. I got a funny text from Mick Foley about being inducted in the Hall of Fame. He was asking me about the Carmelo Anthony thing, all the crazy backstage stuff that happens at those shows. And of course, I rarely have them in the NBA, but yet I had one. My hero, my childhood hero, Bob Backlund, going into the Hall of Fame. Now I'm trying to figure out if I can get down there to New York for that weekend, because how could you possibly miss that? But by the way, we're talking about podcasts and conversations and Twitter. That's the difference. A guy could have the title for 6 years back in the early 80s, and that was the way it was because things moved so slowly. But now, attention span being what it was, I think I kind of created this hashtag called K-Fabermetrics, which is an insider wrestling term combined with sabermetrics for these rare stats. But CM Punk, who had the title for 434 days, in the previous 434 days, the title had changed hands 9 times.
Wow.
Which is an indication of, so you never know what you're going to get in minute 46. Of the 45
K-Fabermetrics. I like it. Sean Grande, I would look forward to hearing you on those random serious channels. I look forward to hearing you on those random serious channels when I'm looking through weather channels to see which one is doing the Celtic game. And then I hear your sulky, what is it? Sulky tones? What's that phrase?
Dulcet tones.
Yeah.
I'm
an idiot.
Dulcet tones are overrated. You've done just
dulcet
fine
tones.
Without,
Yeah, I just have tones.
Talk
to you soon.
All right, man.
Thanks for the time.
You got it.
All right, we're going to bring in Zach Lowe from Grantland, but before we do, a brief message.
Start your 2013 ride at Subway with your own twist on turkey, like the surprisingly low-fat turkey melt. Get it made just the way you say, still 7 grams of fat. Just one bite and you're at Turkeytopia. You so got it made. Subway. Eat fresh.
All right, now we're bringing in Grantland's NBA expert, Zach Lowe, who wrote about the Celtics today. And Zach and I have talked a lot behind the scenes about a Rondo train. Last week we were talking about whether it made sense. And something you said stuck in my head. Well, they have the 25th offense with him. How much worse could it get? So I guess now the question is, no Rondo, how much worse could this get?
Worse for sure. I mean, but that's the funny thing about Boston is they're such a weird team. They shoot really well, and their offense stinks year after year after year, which suggests that they do everything but shoot pretty poorly. And also might suggest some things about Rondo. Although the more I dug into it, the more I was skeptical of that. And sort of the thing that stands out to me is that even as their offense has been horrible for years, when they've had Rondo, Pierce, and Garnett on the floor, they've scored really well. I mean, it's not like their offense has been bad. It's been those guys on the floor. Their offense has been good. You introduce a bench player or two and things go south. And that's what changed this year is that the offense stunk even when the alleged big three was on the floor. And so that suggests a bunch of things to me, that they miss Ray Allen and Ray Allen's skill set, that Garnett and Pierce are older, and maybe that Rondo needs a certain kind of personnel around him that isn't there anymore. But regardless of his limitations, you take him out, and it's just going to be really interesting to see how this team creates offense. They're going to be a bottom five offense, and maybe that's what they were already. But as we talked about, at least with Rondo, they had a high ceiling, like a high 1-game ceiling. If 25 point, 12 assists Rondo, pushing the fast break, taking it, down Tony Douglas's throat in the playoffs, or, scoring 40 against Miami, that guy can show up. And if he shows up twice in a playoff series, they have a chance to win it. Without that guy, they're just dead in the water.
Yeah, he was the puncher's chance guy, and now that the punch is missing. I guess that the interesting part of this is that it was just such a disappointing team to watch all season. And the pieces just didn't fit. Nobody could figure out why. And yesterday during that Miami game, you felt like an identity was emerging. And I might have just been the one game and ABC and Miami and all that stuff, but I did feel like I was watching the KG Pierce Doc era Celtics in that game. And I don't know if it was a one-game aberration or whether they needed some sort of jolt. I mean, you never want the jolt to be your best player tears his ACL, but something was wrong. Something was wrong with that team. And yesterday was one of the few times I felt like, all right, well, they might, whether they win or lose this game, this team looks like the team that I remember watching the last few years. Did you feel the same way?
Yeah, I mean, sort of. Their defense is their defense, right? I mean, we talked about that after the Celtics' first 15 or 20 games when their defense was bad, and I said they've earned the benefit of the doubt with me. And for once, I was right about something, because since the turn of January, they've been neck and neck with Indiana as the best defense in the league. And if you play like that, you got a chance to win most nights if you sort of can squeeze enough out of the offense. And they have that pride, and they try hard, and they know where to be. And it, the Garden was rocking, and it was Miami, and Jeff Green looked great defending LeBron one-on-one, which is like reason 1A why they signed him, specifically to guard LeBron, not LeBron's player type, but LeBron specifically. So it all sort of looked like it made sense, but it's just, it's one game. Over the long haul, it's going to be very difficult for this team to really be competitive.
Yeah, and the problem is I actually do think they're going to play well for the next couple weeks, which will bring them close to the trade deadline. And it might be a little fool's gold because, when people get injured sometimes, the minutes fall into place. This was a team where none of the guards were playing enough minutes. Now all of a sudden everybody's going to get time and they're going to all band together. And I think there's going to be a little bit of a sense that they want to prove that they're not, they're reading all this stuff. They're reading everybody saying they're dead without Rondo. So I think there's some pride's going to kick in. And it remains to be seen whether that would be a bad thing, because it might convince them to not do anything before the trade deadline. And, maybe they should. It's not like this team's going to win the championship. So I don't know. It's going to be a fascinating month. It's somehow this Celtics team around the trade deadline. How many years in a row has this team been like one of the 3 or 4 teams you had to keep your eye on the whole time? It just seems like this is part of February now.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, and I hope that that Danny, and I know that Danny is smart enough to not let a little bit of fool's gold impact his thinking. I mean, everyone is saying the right things today. Let's see how the team plays. We're not willing to give up. All of that kind of stuff, and I think, as you say, there will be guys who are ready for this. I mean, I've heard sort of through back channels that Courtney Lee has been really unhappy in Boston because he feels like the whole offense is Rondo pounding the ball and he doesn't get to do anything. I wrote today on how Jet just hasn't meshed with the team for a bunch of reasons. I think one of them is that he and Rondo are an awkward match. They both need the ball a lot.
Yeah.
So I think we'll see some stuff like that. But I also, Danny, he did it in the offseason where he tried to sort of have the best of both worlds, keep the old guys together, bring in some new blood, nail the mid-level exception, which it turned out he didn't nail it, and see if you can contend without sacrificing the future. And I just don't think you can realistically say a year later with Pierce and KG a year older, Rondo recovering from, among the most serious operations you can have, that we can just sort of stand pat and be a title contender. I just think the writing is on the wall.
Well, and on top of that, Pierce and KG have been healthy this whole season, which is kind of fluky. Once you start hitting your late 30s, stuff starts happening. These guys have been playing a lot of minutes. They logged a ton of minutes in that, in actually both of the Friday, Sunday games. Like we might be looking back at all the minutes they logged on Friday and Sunday as like the tipping point for them this season.
Yeah, and Pierce was banged up by the end of last year in that Miami series, sort of limping around. And you brought it up yesterday on TV. Just the irony of them just regretting blowing that 27-point lead against the Hawks on Friday is just devastating.
Yeah, and you were talking about defense. Yesterday they had Barbosa and Jason Terry out there at the same time. I don't think you can find two worse defensive guards in the league. They might be 1 and 2. Is there anybody else in that class? I'm trying to think.
Jamal Crawford wants a piece of this conversation.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. My apologies, Jamal Crawford. But yeah, I mean, those are two historically bad defenders. I think I could score on either of them.
But that was what was so amazing about Wade having a bad game or a so-so game, is that he's just individually eaten those guys up his whole career. Specifically, those guys. I mean, Indiana couldn't play Barbosa by the end of that playoff series last year because they had no place to hide him. So yeah, that kind of thing is unsustainable. And I was surprised we didn't see more of Bradley in the overtimes. But again, you can't play those guys against most opponents together.
I do think they can reinvent themselves a little bit. Even though Lee didn't shoot well yesterday, I like when Bradley and Lee play together because they're such good defenders, and especially as a combo. Neither of them's really a natural point guard, but I think sometimes we overrate whether somebody's a point guard or shooting guard, all that stuff. Both of them can handle the ball. Pierce creates a lot of shots for the team anyway. Like I think you can get by with those two guys, and suddenly that turns into a possible strength. But let's talk about trades though, because first of all, KG has a no trade clause, so I guess it's up to him whether this is how he wants to spend the last year of his career. And I do think this could be the last year. There's been a lot of rumblings, and amazingly rumblings he might want to go on TV, which I thought was interesting. But
wow, could he stay on TV without?
I think it would have to be taped. Yeah, I think it would have to be taped. But yeah, there's been a lot of buzz about that maybe this was going to be his last year anyway. I don't know. Who knows? People said that last year and he came back. But would he want to chase a ring after he's already won a ring? That's the thing. Dirk's in that same spot. Even Paul's in that same spot. At some point, you got to weigh what's more important to you, finishing your career with the team that, your favorite team. In Pierce's case, the team he spent his whole career with, or let's say Indiana offers Danny Granger for Pierce right now. If you're Pierce, are you excited about that? You go to Indiana, your new team, new city, new teammates, like you're at the point of your career. Do you even care? I don't know.
Well, I missed that one and going through my potential Pierce trades, Granger for Pierce. I don't think it's super realistic, but it is interesting that Indiana would be a really fascinating team if they had another scorer that could shoot. And, Granger, if he comes back, has just 1 year left on his contract. But yeah, I mean, as you say, KG is there are just too many complications. Even aside from the no trade clause, it's like a team that gets him would either be getting, a guy that's going to earn at least $18 million over the 2 years after this one, or someone who might just retire at any time. It's just too dicey. Pierce is movable. And look, I think you broke the story. They almost traded him to the Nets last year.
Yeah.
And they peddled him all around the league. So it's not as if Danny has some sort of sentimental attachment to the degree that it would prevent him from sniffing around what's out there.
He has a $4 million buyout next season, which is enticing to teams.
He's almost an expiring contract.
We were talking before we went on the air yesterday. We were talking about just in the green room about how much sense a Pierce Gasol trade made for both sides, and whether, given the history of those two franchises, whether they would want to help each other, and think of all the acrimony. And even everybody says that the Lakers KG trade the owners had basically agreed on it, and McHale was the one who said, "No, I'm not trading the Lakers." Like that's the reason KG went to the Celtics. It would have been fascinating to see if Pierce and Gasol, like, who would have eventually thrown their body in front of that. Because when you really think about that trade, it makes sense if the Lakers were going to keep Dwight Howard. You put KG and Gasol together. This is pre-Rondo injury, but I do think the Celtics would have been in better shape than they would have been with Pierce. I don't know. My personal take is I think he stays, and I don't think they do anything. And maybe if one of those two got hurt for a couple weeks, then maybe you do the 2007 tank and you try to get in the top 10 and do that whole thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's never exciting to say that, but I think standing pat is always the most likely course for things like this because it's hard to make a trade.
Yeah.
But I just feel I don't know. I have this feeling, and it doesn't really come from anything. Although I've been talking to people about it for the last 48 hours, both about Rondo and then post Rondo injury. I feel like it wouldn't surprise me if he gets moved. If you put a gun to my head right now, I would guess Pierce gets moved. I just feel like they're going to explore it more seriously and be less picky about what they get. But it's just going to be very hard for them to get like a blue chip young guy or a good first round pick. But they'll try, and maybe they get an okay young guy instead of a blue chip young guy. I don't know.
Too bad you would look at the Nets and say that's a chance, but Jared Wallace has been so bad this year. I think he's more untradeable than Jeff Green is. I don't see anyone else that they could put in a deal. Like the team that's going to trade for Pierce is a team that thinks they're one piece away from potentially winning the title. So, like, if you're Memphis and you flip Rudy Gay into Paul Pierce, I don't think that puts you any closer or further away. I don't think that's going to make a dramatic difference. But if you're Indiana and you're playing really well without Granger anyway, and the writing's on the wall with him, you'd have to really think about that, especially because you can buy out Pierce's deal next year. And if anything, I think Indiana would have to throw in something else. I think the Clippers are another team because they have
the Clippers are my Godfather team. Because of Bledsoe.
Yes.
And, Butler, Billups, Bledsoe almost works by itself. They might have to add in a little salary because the Clippers are like right up against the luxury tax and obviously don't want to go over it. And they know they're going to have to trade him, whether it's now or next year. So that is an interesting one to me. And, Indiana, as you say, I think Boston would have to get more than just Granger, who's injured. But I disagree with you on Memphis. I think Memphis with Pierce is better than Rudy Gay and fits that team better than Rudy Gay. I think that would be really interesting. I don't think the Celtics want Rudy Gay.
I think he's better in the moment. I don't know if we would be looking back and saying that was the difference, because the problem with Memphis is they basically depleted their bench. I don't know how they're going to have 9 decent guys for 4 straight playoff series. That's the part. I get that trade. I thought it made sense, but then how do you have a bench after that? Unless you love John Lowe.
Well, they like this Chris Johnson kid from Dayton, who's, I think 11 of his first 15 shots have been threes. That's a good sign for them. And my guess is they have at least one other signing coming down the pike. But yeah, everyone better stay healthy. Particularly Darrell Arthur, who hasn't been able to stay healthy, though a lot of that is just bad luck.
So you think Hollinger could be the new Dork Elvis, like just find these gems in D-League and weird European countries?
I think his Dork Elvis qualifications are well established by this point.
I look at Oklahoma City, even though they sucked yesterday and they lost to the Lakers, and it feels like the gap's widening just because of how well Durant's playing. Really hard for me to believe somebody could beat them 4 times in a series unless you have LeBron in that team, which is, which in the case of Memphis, like, I just don't see it. I think they need to improve somehow. They have to turn Rudy Gay into something that would make me think that they could beat Oklahoma City in a series. Durant has the look to me. Do you feel that way? I just feel, I know they lost yesterday, but something about that team, maybe, and we talked about this on TV, maybe the post-Harden, people counting them out, saying they weren't contenders anymore, something pushed that team over the edge because they're like eye of the tiger. And
Yeah, they're really mean looking. Their mean faces are just out of control.
And it feels like legit. I don't feel like it's posturing mean face. I actually feel like they're angry. They're playing with an edge, which I love. I think it's great. I think that's an edge Miami needs. When Miami is a team that's playing like they won the title last year.
Oklahoma City is they're scary. They're just really, really good, and all of their core players have gotten a little bit better in ways that the team really needed them to get better at. And I think they solved the Spurs last year. I mean, look, the Spurs are going to give anyone trouble, but I just think Oklahoma City's athleticism is just overwhelming to them. And, what the hell's going on with Chris Paul? That's the question. Like, another week of this, people are going to start asking, like, what the hell's going on with Chris Paul?
It's a good question. I've asked it. I've been wondering. It's always like game to game, and then all of a sudden you're at the 10-day mark. It's like, wait a second, what's going on here? 2 more teams for Pierce. Spurs, because they have that Steven Jackson expiring contract. The problem is they don't have the blue chipper, or not blue chipper, but they don't have that, like the Eric Bledsoe type piece for a trade, I don't feel like. But maybe it's Kawhi Leonard, sorry. Maybe could you maybe think about a Jackson and Kawhi Leonard for Pierce?
I don't think they do Kawhi Leonard, and this is
they love him.
Yeah, he's Pop's guy, and this is why the Spurs are not really interesting to me, because they have Jackson's expiring contract, but it's just that doesn't really give you the Celtics have no reason to do that with Pierce's being sort of a semi-expiring, and the next best guy that they might be able to offer, who's young or young-ish and interesting, is Splitter, but he's a free agent after this year. He's going to get paid, and if they don't replace him with another big, they need him. So I just don't see a Spurs deal without a third team anyway.
But what's interesting is that I don't think the Spurs have enough. I think they're a player away. So they're usually not a team that panics or a team that pushes all the chips in the middle of the table. But they might have to do that with that Jackson contract.
Yeah, they need something like they get the number 1 seed, Clippers upset the Thunder in the 2-3 series.
Yeah.
And they get the Clippers in the conference finals. That's the sort of route for the Spurs, I think.
I don't think that Manu and it's a little like the KG Pierce thing. Manu and Duncan aren't at the age anymore where you can count on them night to night. So it's like you have the big 3, but you really don't, because you don't know what you're getting from the 3 guys every night, which is why I think they need a 4th guy. The other team, which we haven't mentioned that I think is really interesting and is a really smart team that has proven they will take chances, is Denver. And Denver has the Iguodala expiring contract. They've been playing a lot better lately, which we knew was going to happen because of their schedule, and they had just a crazy schedule coming out of the gate with a ton of road games, and now they've had a lot of home games, and their record took off. Iguodala hasn't played that well for them. In general, even though the team's been winning, I don't watch them and feel like that's the team it's going to eventually end up being. Something's off. I can't put my finger on it. What do you make of those guys?
Denver is – I've given up trying to predict Denver's behavior, even though I talk to people there every once in a while, because they just – it's not that I don't believe what I hear out of there. And what I hear out of there is they want to sort of chill out for a while and see what these young players can do and how the team meshes and all this. They're just – opportunities are just going to find them because of all the interesting pieces that they have, some of which sort of positionally overlap, all sorts of contract sizes. They could do anything. And chances are just going to find them. And they're the kind of team, like, honestly, if they got a really good big man, if you put Josh Smith on that team right now, I don't think anybody wants any part of them in the playoffs. I mean, I don't think they'd be favored to beat one of the top 3 in the West, but they'd be a huge pain in the ass.
The trade I was thinking was, if the Lakers trade Dwight, he's going to want to go to Brooklyn because that's where he wanted to go anyway. If Brooklyn trades for Dwight, they're going to have to trade Brook Lopez. That doesn't help the Lakers because the whole reason they're trading Dwight is because they want to get faster and have more shooters. Now, if you send Brook Lopez to Denver as part of a 3-team trade, all of a sudden that becomes very interesting because Brook Lopez would be really good for Denver and is exactly what they need and could be a go-to guy. And Brook Lopez in general, it seems like you're on the same page with me. That was the most offensive all-star snub to me. I think he's been really good this year.
Had to be there.
Had to. They were 24-11 with him when he didn't make it. And he's also, I feel like he's improved. He's really turned into a good low post player who you have to either double team or you have to plan for or something, but you can't let him go one-on-one against your guy unless you have somebody great. But Denver could look out there. That could be, if it was a 3-teamer where the Lakers decided they had to get rid of Howard and Howard said, well, I want to go to Brooklyn. And you think of all the perimeter guys they have, Gallinari. If it's Gallinari and Chandler for Lopez, basically, I think I do that if I'm Denver.
Yeah, they don't need both Gallinari and Chandler, which I'm sure George Karl loves those guys because they can play power forward and fit into all sorts of funky lineups, but they don't need both of them. The danger is I don't know that they want to get trapped is the wrong word. I don't know that they want to have like almost $30 million committed every year, 25 or 30 to Brook Lopez and JaVale McGee. I think to make a big deal like that, they would have to find a place to dump JaVale. And I don't know that place exists right now. But that's the other interesting thing about the Celtics and Paul Pierce to me is you mentioned that the only team that would trade for him is a contender that's one piece away. See, if you can't find that team, and there aren't that many, I think the other kind of team that would trade for him is like a team that can give Boston an interesting asset plus like sort of a semi-undesirable asset that might blossom in Boston and take back one of the Brandon Bass, Jason Terry, Courtney Lee deals, which is why I think Toronto is an interesting fit. But go ahead. You were going to say something else.
No, I like the Toronto. So you're saying like you get the Calderon expiring, you get
Bargnani. Has to be a Bargnani.
Oh, I got excited thinking they might be dumb enough to trade that rookie.
Ross isn't going anywhere.
Could we get them drunk? Could we take them out?
I don't know. I don't know a lot about Brian Colangelo's habits, but
I might have to take Brian Colangelo out. We'll put some shots in him, and then we'll get Calderon and Terrence Ross for Pierce done. But yeah, that would be. See, that's the kind of deal that the Celtics would be like, oh, really? Okay, we'll do that. And I just don't think anybody's going to make an offer like that.
Yeah, a team that's not an immediate contender has no use for Pierce unless getting him can allow them to get out from under a contract they don't want or need. And the Raptors don't want or need Bargnani. I don't know. Amir Johnson and Ed Davis are playing great together, and Bargnani is just not a necessary piece there. But he's the guy who really look. I've written a lot of nasty stuff about Bargnani. Not a fan of his game. He could mesh. If he could be sort of like a Ryan Anderson player with Rondo, he could have some value.
I like Bargnani. I think he's feisty. I don't think he's like a stiff. I do think he has skills, and I think he could be used correctly in the right team. And I also think he could look really bad on the wrong team if he's used incorrectly. I'm not willing to give up on him. I don't know what the right team is for him, though.
He needs to thrive in Boston. He would need to be able to take like a year's worth of offensive, xenophobic verbal abuse from Garnett. And he would need to take only 3-pointers and shots at the rim. He would need to ditch these like 18-foot fadeaway post-up jumpers. He would need to be like the pick-and-roll guy for Rondo that is sort of like a Dirk Light, where the big man guarding him is afraid to leave him so Rondo can get in the lane and create all sorts of craziness. And again, for Boston, if they can dump Bass or dump a contract they don't want, it's not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah. Well, you talk about dumps, like if Denver offered them JaVale McGee and Wilson Chandler for Pierce and something smaller, like that's another one where you're taking on a lot of money. You're doing Denver a favor because I'm sure they'd love to get out of that McGee contract at this point, unless they enjoy paying somebody $11 million a year to play 20 minutes.
Yeah, I thought of both. It's funny. I thought of in trying to find that sort of veteran player whose team might be tired of him, but is still sort of young and might produce in the right setting. I thought of both JaVale and Nene, the sort of dual parts of that Washington-Denver trade. But Nene, his medical issues are just too severe. But that guy's a player when he's on the floor. JaVale's the opposite. He has no medical issues. He just can't really understand how to play basketball properly.
Yeah, he's has no idea what he's doing. It's funny, the Bargnani, if the Spurs, like let's say the Spurs get him. Let's say they just say screw it. They trade Steven Jackson and that's it for Bargnani. Just a total salary dump. I think all of us would be like, uh-oh. They know something. They're going to figure out how to use him. The league would be scared if they got Bogdani. So I do feel like when you talk about the Celtics with him, yeah, maybe. I don't know. It just feels like we should get more for Paul Pierce.
Well,
than
so
crossing
do
your
Celtics.
fingers.
So do Celtics fans, but I don't. Maybe every fan base is like this, and Celtics fans are just more vocal than others. But like,
And irrational.
I just get more trade proposals from Boston fans that are like, "Can we get this awesome guy without giving up like anything of value?"
Yeah.
And maybe they'll throw in a draft pick too. And you just want to say, I did like the JJ Redick over the weekend. The JJ Redick rumors are like, "Can we get JJ Redick for Jason Terry?" And it's like,
Yeah.
a rebuilding Magic team that has Aaron Aflalo like does not want Jason Terry for 3 more years at $5 million a year. It's just not realistic.
And also, can we all stop reacting to weird internet reports? Celtics eyeing JJ Redick. Oh, really? What are we trading for him? I know everybody on my team. Are we giving up Avery Bradley for him? Because I don't want to do that. So we don't have anything else. But yeah,
Nope.
these things, it just seems like now any rumor can get tweeted. Like, I'm sure you got it a couple of days ago. Somebody tweeted some sort of 3-teamer with Gay,
Rudy, Powell, and Pierce.
and
right?
meanwhile, like, the Lakers are not taking on money past 2014. Like, I don't know, it's just not happening.
Someone should
They
track
think-
down the origin of that rumor. I still don't know where it came from.
It came from thin air. Like, I really feel like we could just go on a fake Twitter account and just launch some trade rumor and see if it.
Don't. Just please delete that from the podcast because someone's going to do that. And it's going to
You're
be
right.
terrible.
You know what? We should delete that from the podcast because I don't want that blood on my hands. No, but it's really crazy to me sometimes how this stuff, how the snowball gets rolling down the mountain, and then nobody bothers to look like, where'd the snowball come from? Oh, I don't know. It's a rumor. It's
The
what I've
best
been
are
hearing.
The best are those mock Twitter accounts that are like Woj Yahoo with like 9 O's at the end of Yahoo, but like credible people fall for it, and it's like Wolves trade Kevin Love for Nick Batum, says Woj Yahoo, and it just gets retweeted all over the place.
The Bledsoe thing, last thing, and then we'll go. I'm going to be really interested to see if the Clippers trade Bledsoe or not. I personally would not trade him, but they're also going to have to pay him at some point. And it's a much less interesting, much less lucrative version of the James Harden situation where do you want to be proactive and try to trade him at the peak of his value, or do you want to wait and cross your fingers and hope you can sign him at some weird discount? But if you can't, then everybody knows you have to trade him. And I really like Bledsoe. I've obviously been watching him the last couple of years. I just think his physical gifts are right up there with anybody in the league, and the more he plays, the better he is. And went toe to toe with Westbrook last week. I don't know if I trade him, and especially when I don't know if Chris Paul is going to be there next year, because Chris Paul hasn't said one way or the other.
Well, and he's
pretty
hurt.
risky, and he's hurt. And I don't know if. Little newsflash: I'm not sure I want to pay Chris Paul $100 million for 5 years. I know I'd have to. I don't know if I'm crazy about it. I don't know if I'm crazy about it though. I don't know what is his knee going to look like 5 years from now.
I don't think I mean, unless you get really damaging medical reports, I don't know that that's a decision you can make. But yeah, to me, the Clippers are the most fascinating team to watch as we approach the trade deadline because they have Bledsoe, because they can't re-sign Bledsoe for what he's worth if their owner is Donald Sterling, and they have DeAndre Jordan for $10 million, Griffin at the max, which just got kicked up another notch because of the Rose Rule provision that now applies to them, and Paul at the max. Just can't have all 4 of those guys. So if you're re-signing Bledsoe at fair value next summer, to me that is a signal we think we can dump DeAndre somewhere, and Blake will be okay with it. And the other thing that's fascinating is that, like, by all evidence, they should be a team that is going all out for the NBA title this year. And can you, like, who's their second best front court player? Is it Lamar Odom?
Yeah.
No,
it's Lamar Odom.
Their second best big man. Can you win the title with Lamar Odom as your second best big man?
That's their most reliable crunch time lineup. It's usually him and Blake.
And he's shooting like 38%.
That's why they're a Garnett destination if you ever decide you want to get traded.
or a Josh Smith destination, or to me, I'm kicking around. If I'm Gary Sachs, their GM, I'm kicking around every potential available big man who can actually play both sides of the floor pretty well. And I'm going for it. I'm going all in.
Me too, because there's only 3 or 4 teams right now that could beat you. And the other thing is, they are having. This is why I picked them to not have a good season. I was worried about their numbers. I thought they had too many guys, and maybe I overthought a little, but it's finally come to fruition. Now they have too many guys, and now Caron Butler's unhappy. Matt Barnes isn't getting quite the same minutes he was getting. Great, they got to squeeze in Grant Hill. You only need 9 guys in basketball. You don't need 11. And I do think, everybody's blaming Chris for this losing streak. I think it goes beyond Chris. And I think it screwed up the calibration of whatever the minutes were and the bench, the starters, all that stuff. And if they fall to the 3 seed and they have to win 2 Game 7s on the road, I don't see it. That's the crazy thing about San Antonio. They just hang and they hang and they hang and they hang, and you look up and they have the second best record. It's like, I don't understand this. How does this team have the second best record? But that's just what they do.
No team will test the Clippers' improved defense like San Antonio, which just tore them a new one in the playoffs last year. And again, Lamar Odom's their second best big man. I mean, DeAndre Jordan is probably their second best big man, but they just aren't going down the stretch with him and Griffin on the floor together because they can't shoot free throws. And, they're playing small a lot now with Grant Hill or Matt Barnes at the floor, sort of take your pick, whichever one it is, and which is useful. But do they really need Barnes, Hill, and Butler? Especially if they could dump Butler's $8 million next year. That's not a small thing for Donald P. Sterling.
No. They need to make a trade, but I don't know if they will, and they haven't. I don't even know that much about the new GM. And, everybody thought Chris and Vinny were the people signing the free agents over the summer. So, I'm not sure. It'll be interesting. Fascinating month ahead of us in basketball. I think you're going to be busy. Zach Lowe.
Yeah, we'll have time to rehash a lot of these questions.
Yes. Zach Lowe, we read you on Grantland. Thanks as always for the time.
Have fun, man.
So I get to sign off. Whoa!
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Pod Center at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.